You guys are in for a treat today. You are hanging out with me and Tabitha Yates, who is the author of the new book, Jesus in Therapy. It's about bridging the gap between faith and the mental health arena. Guys, this is brilliant. It's needed. If you haven't seen anything like it before, or you're only hearing about the self-help industry, Tabitha is coming to break the chains and the yoke of bondage that's been connected to it and introducing you to the one in which will carry the light load. Tabitha, I'm so grateful for the work that you did here and so grateful that we got to meet last year before this book came out. It feels like such a treat to have it in reality in my hands.
Yes, you were such a huge part of just giving me the needed confirmation I was needing in that point. I think it was the second round of edits I was coming through, and I was constantly seeking God, just, please be before me and show me that you're before me, show me that you're in this, because I don't want to do it if you're not. And so you really just stepped in when I needed a word from God, and I was so thankful for that.
I honestly don't remember what I said because that's literally how prophetic words work. You're just like literally being a conduit for Christ. But I remember
Mhm.
the emotion. I remember connecting. I remember holding you in the middle of all the people walking around. I remember the tears. And I
Yeah.
remember you telling me that was the exact words that I had asked God for the night before to say, I need confirmation. And so I'm saying that not to gloat, not to point at me, but to say that God knows and God has already
Mhm.
positioned your answer. But asking
Mhm.
God questions is so critical. And, putting the rug out there, throwing that fleece out there and saying, God, I've asked you time and time again, but I want you to do it one more time. Can you show me one more time? And so
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I got to be a part of that moment and to see this come to fruition because it is such a need. There's been such traction around this book. It's been already received awards. It's already in bookstores. And so this isn't your traditional like, hey, Tabitha did this yesterday by herself and ChatGPT helped her and she threw it up on Amazon. So Tabitha, let's
Mhm.
go through the process. Talk us through this journey, the revelation, and really the richness of what it is.
So this book was 5 years in the making. It really goes into my story of my history of, physical abuse, spiritual abuse, church abuse, mental health issues, depression, my suicide attempt, my psych ward stay, like so many things I didn't really want to talk about. And
Yep.
so God just dragged me kicking and screaming. Like I say it jokingly, but for real, that's why I asked him so many times, like Gideon, I'm like, rain here and here, but not right here. And like, I needed him to be so clear to me that he was going before me in this because it was terrifying. I was having opposition from people I loved most and, the greater world around me. And so I needed to know I was obeying God and then I was doing the right thing and then I was sharing my story with integrity because it does involve abuse in so many other people. And so it
Yes.
was so scary to step into. And God was so faithful. And when I say that I asked for confirmation from you, there was not one single time in the whole writing of this book, which was so long, that I didn't ask God for such a specific word and that it was less than 24 hours past and he'd give it. Like every time, it was never more than a day before he'd send a messenger and answer me back like right away, so that there was just no doubt in my mind. And I couldn't deny that I was doing what God called me to do. And he set this path before me. And it was what he wanted me to do, to tell this story, even though it was so vulnerable and so terrifying. And I was really just putting all my traumas out there for the world just to poke holes at. And nobody really wants to do that, but God was so faithful to show me he was in it and he was guiding me and that he would protect me. And that was the word you gave me, because I was just begging God, like, show me I'll be okay if I do this. And I put this out there and I step out into this world that is just so scary. And I just feel all the arrows coming. So show me you're in it and you're protecting me.
So rich. I process through like that one pain point that often messengers, writers, authors, podcasters, whomever who is feeling that nudge from the Lord, but they have these elements of fear, and it can often be correlated to other people, right? We have fear of man
Yeah.
and fear of judgment and fear of what will other people think of us and all of those
Mhm.
pieces.
Yeah.
What allowed you to like continue to push past that? And since releasing
Mm.
it, has the level of rejection you conjured up as a story actually come to fruition or any of those scenarios unfolded?
Um, some of the rejection did happen, and it was
Yeah.
from some very hard places.
Yeah.
because obviously when you're going to dive into, trauma that involves so many other people, your silence benefits them. And so for my whole life being intimidated and scared to share my truth and not feeling like I was even allowed to share my story, that was the first thing God had to reveal to me in the first chapter I wrote, that you are allowed to shine a light on this. I've told you to. And I didn't feel free I didn't own my story. I didn't feel like I had a right to tell it. And so there was that rejection piece that definitely happened, which is why it was such a costly act of obedience, because I had to be like, I will do this even if I lose everyone, even if, I am just harassed by people, and no matter what the response to this is, I know the greater good that's being brought about by my obedience will be worth it. And that's, I feel like, what I have been seeing as it's just started. I mean, it's been out a month, but just as it's starting to get the response that it's getting, is God had spoken to me right before the book came out. I turned 41, and he was really speaking to me about that biblical significance of that. And I got it tattooed on me, 41, just of that, finally bringing God bring everything to fruition and answering my cries and everything that I sowed in tears, which I really did. He finally brought that to pass. And so it's just been amazing just to start getting a glimpse of what God's going to do with my yes and my obedience.
So good. I'm like obviously processing immediately. I'm like 41, what's the significance? I'm thinking of like the post 40 years of exile, right? You're now in the land of the milk and the honey. You've passed over the Jordan. I'm thinking of like the 40 days of fasting that the Lord did, and the 40 days of temptation. And then what happened when he went back that next day, of the freedom that he had just literally fought with Satan and faced the enemy, and now is on this spiritual high because he spent time with the Father. And so that's awesome. It's rich. It actually gets me excited. I'm not yet 41, but I'm like, okay, let's go 40 and 41. I'm in for it.
Yeah, I was so depressed about 40, but I was actually like, I'm excited now to turn 41. I wasn't, but once God kind of gave me that word, I'm like, all right, I'm okay with it.
It's so good. It's so good. I love it. Okay, so let's talk about like the friction with faith, right? The friction with the church around mental health. I think it's bananas. Obviously, I am a huge mental health advocate myself, not to the same level of time invested that you are doing. And specifically, I haven't written a mental health book, but if you read any of my books, I talk about the value and the time frame and the years and the finances and the resources that went in to counseling, both maritally and individually. And I'm just such a proponent. Why do you think, and what would you say is the biggest pushback from the church when it comes to the mental health arena?
I think for some strange reason, we have separated physical health from mental health. Like, it's not the same brokenness. And so we judge people, and we have this double standard when they're taking care of their mental health and going to the doctor for their mental health, where we wouldn't think twice if they're going to the doctor for their physical health. So for some reason, there's this huge divide between the two when they're both just stewarding the body God gave us.
That's an easy like nail on the head, right? Like, you guys process that for just a second. Who have you judged based on them going to see a mental health counselor or being on some sort of medication connected to their brain, the most important muscle in their being, versus those who have gone to the doctor to help their body? I just got diagnosed. I don't even like to say it out loud because I don't believe in diagnosis in that concept. But my body, my thyroid is struggling in some regards. I had like cortisol and adrenal issues and Hashimoto's. And I've never had physical ailments ever. And so this was like a new thing for me to step into. And honestly, Tabitha, I had more personal shame connected to that than I did going to go and sit with therapists and process through my mess and my trauma, because I had always been well, right? In that particular physical capacity. And I think mentally, it was more of like a generational thing. So like our generation is much more confident in talking about like, who's your therapist? What did she say? Have you asked your therapist? Versus our parents are like, oh, don't say that out loud. Why would you do that? So it also is a generational thing. And so when I say church, we're not just like pointing at, the church. We're pointing at people in the church who have created this stigma. Talk to us more about your own journey in that process and how you what were like the emotions and things that you worked through in order to be set free?
So I very much grew up in an old school, really hardcore evangelical church that was it was a sin. It was because there's something unconfessed. It was God's punishing you. You don't have enough faith. You're not praying enough. I mean, I've heard every single one.
Yep.
And so it was, and I was a kid, so I assumed they knew what they were talking about and that they were correct.